We are here to fuel your Rockets news. This is the Rocket Fuel podcast presented by Clutch Fans. I am your co-host, Lachard Binkley. Of course, you can always find me on Twitter at Binkley Hoops. And you can find my written work on the Dream Shake, which is presented by SB Nation. As usual, we appreciate everybody that jumps on every week. We kind of have a special podcast this week. We had the first game last night. The Rockets had a huge victory over the Spurs, so we definitely wanted to jump on and give a quick recap of last night's game. But before we get too far into it, I want to let my co-host introduce himself because this is his first official co-hosting duties with Rockets Fuel. He was, of course, on a previous podcast, but I want to give him a chance to introduce himself to the audience again.
Hey, what's up, y'all? So it's Vator. You can find me on Twitter at Vator_H-Town, and I'm looking forward to doing these with Lachard. It's going to be a great year if last night was any indication.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, we know the Rockets are probably not going to be the worst team in the league. I think that's probably going to go to the Spurs because I know they were missing a couple of players, but at the same time, you can kind of see the Spurs are like 2 or 3 years even behind the Rockets at this point in their rebuild. But not to go too deep into the Spurs, I want to kind of actually start off with the Rockets, of course, and talk about Jabari Smith. We saw him struggle in the summer league with his shot. His defense, of course, was still excellent. But last night we saw exactly why the Rockets were so excited about drafting him number 3 and why a lot of people for most of the year thought he was going to be the number one overall pick. Him and Tari Eason tied for the game high with 21 points each. Jabari came out very aggressive. His first points was an easy dunk off of a great pass from Alperen Sengun, and he just continued to pour it on after that, making several threes, and he just looked really confident out there on the court. So what did you see from Jabari Smith and how the Rockets used him last night that kind of helped him be a lot more successful than he was in the summer league?
So for me, and I think for a lot of people, last night was just kind of a validation. It was like Jabari was a revelation last night. He did all the things that a lot of people were saying that he was going to be able to do. Summer league is not really the best place for a guy like Jabari. Jabari is he plays off of the talents of other people. He's not really a shot creator at this point in his career, and he needs guys around him who can draw that defense and then kick it out to him so he can get that pretty shot off. And that's what we saw last night. In summer league, he was dealing with a situation where you got other guys out there. Those guards are trying to establish themselves and make a name for themselves and earn a roster spot. So, things don't always flow as smoothly. But people from the get-go, the people who really know basketball and kind of know Jabari's archetype knew that, when he was in the game with a creator like Alperen Sengun, Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green, he was going to flourish. And we saw that last night. I mean, he got so many wide open shots. You saw the floor spacing that he provides because guys did not want to leave him. And he doesn't need a whole lot of room to get that shot off. There were a few times I saw guys kind of trying to decide whether or not they wanted to help, but they didn't want to leave him. And they played it almost perfectly. And he was still able to get his shot up because, he's 6'10", 6'11". That's pretty much an unblockable shot for, 99% of the NBA. Maybe Giannis or somebody like that might be able to get out there on his shot. But, there's only one Giannis in the NBA. And so, like, last night, I was so hyped up, Lachard. I was so excited because, pretty much everything that we said was going to happen happened. You saw the defense. He brings that in spades. He brought the defensive intensity that he brought from game 1 in the summer league that transferred over into a real NBA game. And then he also, the shot looked a little bit flat. I don't know if he was rushing it. I don't know if it was just him adjusting to the NBA distance or, whatever it was. I was never concerned. Like, coming out of college, you knew that dude could shoot. So, guys go through slumps. And I just knew, like, once he got in the lab with John Lucas and, they worked on a few things, that it was gonna pay off. And we saw pretty much he came as advertised. One thing that he did that I really loved that he did a lot at Auburn was that pull-up 3 in transition.
Yeah.
That showed me, I'm like, okay, he's confident. That's a shot that you have to take with confidence. And when he set his feet and he let it fly and hit nothing but net, man, I jumped up out of my chair because I'm like, that's the dude we drafted. That's the guy that, a lot of people were saying was going to be like the first pick in the draft. And they were saying that for months. So, now I feel like Jabari, he's gotten a little underrated, by a lot of people because he fell to 3. And I like it though. He's under the radar now a little bit. He's gonna have a chip on his shoulder, and I think he came out last night and at least for one night, he proved the naysayers wrong, and he proved the doubters wrong. And I think a lot of people are gonna be back on the Jabari Smith train.
Yeah, I mean, you pointed out what he did in Auburn. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he was one of the first guys 6'10" or taller since Kevin Durant to shoot like over 40% from like 30 feet and beyond. I mean, he has his shot range pretty much unlimited, and we of course we didn't see that in summer league like you pointed out. Summer league is basically something Coach Silas kept saying over and over again. It's just basically glorified pickup game. So that's not really, like you said, the setting for Jabari Smith. He needs playmakers around him, and you saw that he was in the corners a lot, which I think we'll see a lot throughout the season. I wouldn't be surprised if not this year, eventually he's probably one of the leading guys in corner threes, just because when you have playmakers all over the court and you're able to spread the court, like you said, they're not going to want to leave Jabari. But at the same time, you saw Alperen Sengun was just starting to dominate in the paint, and they started easing over to try to guard him. And then you saw Jalen and KPJ really kind of took a step back offensively, but just wait till they actually start, being aggressive and getting to the basket. That puts even more pressure on the defense. So I think it's kind of sky's the limit right now for Jabari. I mean, if that shot is going, I know a lot of people really didn't consider him for Rookie of the Year before training camp and before preseason got kicked off. But you combine that with his defense. I mean, I know Paulo's probably going to have
special defense.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically talking about elite defense. I mean, I know Banchero's probably going to have the ball in his hands more, but you have to, if you factor in offensively and defensively, there's no reason why he shouldn't be in the running for Rookie of the Year, especially with Chet Holmgren out for the entire year. And you mentioned that pull-up three. I mean, that's something you're only going to do that if you're confident. You're not going to do that if you're hesitant and don't want to shoot. So he was definitely confident at that point. Even a mid-range shot that he actually missed earlier in the game, he took 2 or 3 dribbles and pulled up right in mid-range, and nobody's pretty much blocking his shot. Even though he missed a shot, it was really encouraging to see him go out there and take shots outside of just taking three-pointers. And remember, this is just the first preseason game. Something Coach Silas mentioned to us in the press room before the game was they only have like 4 or 5 sets in right now. So they haven't even implemented in most of their sets, which, I mean, it's not uncommon. I don't want anybody to, start sending in hate mail to Coach Silas saying this offense is too plain. Most teams don't really put in a lot of offenses in the preseason. So I think just throughout the season, you'll see Jabari develop even more when they actually run more complicated sets, because that's going to give me more open shots. Another player,
you want to really get more proficient at a few things. You don't want to just be doing a whole lot of stuff, at 50% proficiency when, it's much better to run those 4 sets and be like really good at them than have like 8 sets. And then you're not really good at any of the 8, so like, I understand what he's doing. You have to put the foundation in place before you really start like expanding on it and building on it.
Yeah. I mean, and we haven't talked about, Eric Gordon looked good last night. I know some people want to get him traded, get him out so young people get the minutes. But, you got to imagine Eric Gordon on one side, Jabari Smith on the other side. You have KPJ and Jalen pushing the ball, getting inside of the lane. Then you have Alperen Sengun down low, most teams are going to have to double team him at some point, because there's just no way one person is going to be able to stay with him in the paint. So, yeah, they still got a lot to work on. And yes, the Spurs are horrible. They're like really bad.
We have to make that caveat, of course. But yes. Hey, we've been the worst team, and this is not an exaggeration. We've been the worst team in the NBA the last 2 years. So, if we go out there and we beat up on another team, like I'm gonna celebrate that. If we can wake up one morning like we did today and actually say we are not the worst team in the NBA anymore. Like I don't care who they had on the floor. I'm very happy about what I saw. Like you said, Sengun was dominating in the paint against a bigger player, and he was a monster down there. And then Jabari looked confident. He looked like he belonged. I like the fact that KPJ and Jalen made a concerted effort to get him the ball. I was a little concerned, there were times at the beginning of last season where when Jalen Green looked like a monster in summer league. This is kind of like opposite. And then in preseason, he kind of took a step back. He deferred to his veteran teammates. And so, to see Jabari come out last night and actually get that many shots up and also to be the leading scorer at halftime, I think he still ended up being the leading scorer of the game, tied with Tari. He looked like he belonged. He was confident. He did everything that I wanted to see him do that first game. And then, like you said, him being in the corner, I mean, that's probably going to be a layup for him at some point.
Yeah.
That's the shortest three-pointer on the whole court, and I think that's going to be knocked down for him. And he, the question that you asked him in the interview yesterday after the game, I saw that you specifically brought that up, and I was glad you asked him that because there was a lot of contention last year about like, why is Jalen Green in the corner? We want him doing more with the ball. I was one of those people too, but like Jabari Smith in the corner is amazing, and that was one of the things that I thought about immediately when we drafted him. If he plays that role and he's in the corner, of course that's not the only thing he's going to be doing, but like Jabari Smith in the corner is going to be like, that might be like a bread and butter thing. Like, you're going to have, like you said, Şengün drawing that double team. You're going to have KPJ. Oh, that's another thing, that the pick and roll KPJ was running,
especially with Fernando. Yeah.
Oh my God. He looked amazing running that pick and roll. I'd like to see them doing a lot more of that. I don't know if it was a matter of Christian Wood not really wanting to do that. I don't know what it was, but like when KPJ got in that pick and roll last night and he was getting downhill, he was playing with pace. He was making good decisions. He was hitting guys, in the pocket, and they were getting easy shots.
Yeah, and just real quickly on KPJ, I mean, it looked really smooth with him and Fernando, especially when the time that Fernando got on the court. Because Fernando, something else Coach Salas mentioned, he rolls hard to the basket. I mean, that's something that you need from your big man. And that's something that Alperen Şengün does roll hard, but he doesn't have the athleticism necessarily that Fernando has to play above the rim. So just have that asset coming off your bench. And reportedly, Woj put out that the Rockets converted his two-way contract into a 4-year long-term deal. I don't know if we got all the details yet as far as if it's a guaranteed contract. I have a feeling that most of it's probably non-guaranteed, but still, to go from no deal to a training camp deal to a long-term contract, I mean, that kind of tells you all you need to know about how confident they are in Bruno Fernando, which may not be as great for Usman Garuba because Fernando was the first guy off the bench, giving Şengün some rest and running those backup minutes. So we may see Garuba either try to get some more minutes at the 4 or possibly moving to the G League and getting some time there because they really seem like they're leaning towards Fernando to get those backup center minutes. But before we get too far into that, I also want to talk about another player that had a great game, Tari Eason. I mean, he had a double-double, 21 points, 10 rebounds off the bench. Coach Salas mentioned that they didn't even run any plays for him at all. But he's just the type of player that he just knows where the basketball is. He's always around the basket. And you can see that at this point, it's getting to the point where the sample size is getting larger and larger. At first, it was like, it's the first couple of games of Summer League, and then he kept doing it, and now he does it in preseason. I think he's going down the same path that Alperen Şengün went last year, where when he first got drafted, some people were like, well, he's probably going to spend some time in the G League. And then he was just the best player on the court, and he spent no time in the G League whatsoever. And I think that's what we're going to see from Tari Eason, that he's just going to fight his way into the rotation, no matter if KJ Martin is still here, Eric Gordon. It just seems like it's just no way you can keep him off the court. So what did you see from Tari Eason in his game last night?
I think he's going to force Salas to play him. I was with you. I thought that he was probably going to end up starting the season in the G League, and I was okay with that because I know he can go down there and work on some things and get better as a player. But like you said, the sample size is becoming overwhelming. Dude got so many, double doubles in the preseason, and the summer league, and we were like, yeah, it's the summer league. But now, first game out in the preseason, what does he do? He does the same exact thing. He gets a double double. He gets this without, like you said, without them running plays for him, without him really being like heavily involved in the offense. He just has a nose for where the basketball is. He knows how to play basketball. You can just see it. It's one of those things where you can't really put a finger on it, but you know it when you see it. And with Tari, I'm looking at him and I'm like, he's athletic, but he's not like a super, bouncy guy. But it's like he's an instinctual player. Like even that steal that he got where he almost had that breakaway windmill dunk. It's just like his anticipation. It's almost like he sees things developing defensively before they even happen. And then he has that massive wingspan and he has enough burst to get to where he needs to get to and make those like really amazing defensive plays. And then offensively, he's like the ultimate like garbage man. He's a utility knife kind of player. He does a little bit of everything. I can't really say that I know what his main strength offensively is, but I know that he keeps getting buckets.
Exactly.
If you leave him open for three enough times, he's probably going to make one or two of them. I know that he's going to get some offensive rebound putbacks. I know that if you close out on him too fast, he can go around you and he can make you pay at the rim with a layup. And he's probably not going to dunk on you, but he just has this weight to his game and I really love watching it. I really hope that at some point in time in the year he becomes like a serious rotation piece because he's a difference maker out there on the floor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes some players you just can't quantify what they do on the court, just by looking at numbers or trying to look at trends. Sometimes they just really good players. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. And I think that's where he kind of got lost in the shuffle in the draft because a lot of draft people, sometimes they try to make comparison like, well, he's like this guy, he's like this guy. And Tari Eason just goes out there and makes plays every single game. And he's not, like you say, he doesn't have the greatest handles. He's not going to jump over anybody. He doesn't necessarily have a great post game yet. He just goes out there and just knows how to score. He knows how to play defense. And since I last checked, that's like the two main things when it comes to being an NBA player is scoring and defense. So he's going to force his way somehow into the rotation. I mean, not to talk ill of anybody, but I think we kind of know one player that's going to be probably out of the rotation. That's Garrison Matthews, because unfortunately we kind of saw what we saw towards the end of last year was some of the same things where he was taking kind of ill-advised shots, trying to get fouls. Kind of just didn't look like he was involved in the offense. Not to say that he's not going to have a place on the team because you can always use shooters, but it's just that I don't see him anyway playing a major role this year. So that's one player that he's definitely probably going to take minutes from. We have to wait and see what they do with Jayshawn Tate because I think Coach Silas still really values Jayshawn Tate.
Absolutely.
And he's been the most consistent player for the Rockets since he's been here. So I just don't – I saw some people saying, well, it was a good run for Jayshawn Tate. But, I don't see them in any way ready to move on from Jayshawn Tate already because, like you said, he's been consistent, throughout his entire time he's been here.
And here's the thing, Lachard, like Jayshawn Tate didn't even play last night. And so, he's probably, if not Eric Gordon, he's probably the next guy that Silas would pencil in as the starter at small forward. Yeah. I want to see what that three-pointer looks like. Supposedly he worked on it over the summer. And if you have a Jayshawn Tate with a league average three-point shot, you have a really good player on your hands. And, I want to see Jayshawn Tate in combination with Jabari and Tari at some point, just to kind of see what it looks like. Maybe Jabari at a small ball five, Tari and Jay. I know there's not a lot of shooting on the floor at that time, but like I said, we're banking on hopefully Jayshawn being able to shoot. But just think of the disruption that those guys are going to cause defensively on the floor together. That was, like I said, one of the things that I loved watching Tari and Jabari last night was just the fact that they came out aggressive. They didn't look passive. They looked like they belonged in the NBA, and they looked like they know it. And so, when watching the game last night, it was just one of those things where I'm like, that bodes well for what we are going to see during the regular season, because I think a lot of stuff that happens with these young rookies, these young players, is that they kind of don't know where they fit. Jabari knows where he fits. He knows where he's going to get his shots from. And, even if his shot is not falling, he's still going to make an impact on the game defensively. And the same goes for Tari. Tari could have a game where he has 4 points, but you look at the stat sheet and he has, 7 or 8 rebounds. He has, 3 assists. He has 2 steals. that's an impactful player right there.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people probably, we didn't get the high flying, flashy, heliocentric type guy who's going to have the ball in his hands and it's going to be on
Yeah.
Sports Center every night. But we did get two guys who are going to impact the game, and that's what you want. Like when you're building a team, there's two sides of the court, just like you were saying earlier, and we added guys who are like legitimate two-way players, not just he's going to be like a good defensive player and then he might get a bucket here or there offensively. Like Jabari came out and he wanted to establish himself as a player, offensively, and I think I just loved it.
Yeah. And something I just want everybody to keep in mind as they're watching these young guys play throughout the rest of the preseason and early in the season. Jabari had mentioned that the biggest difference between the NBA and college was just the space that you have to deal with. In college, you don't have a 3 second rule, so the game is totally different. So it's an adjustment coming to the NBA where you have a lot more space, but at the same time you have to make the correct moves because he said players are just so much better in the NBA. Their recovery time is better. So it just takes a adjustment period. So even if Jabari goes out next game and he only shoots 4 for 15, that doesn't mean all of a sudden that Jabari can't shoot again. I mean, it's an entire adjustment going from playing also 30, 40 games. Now you're playing 80 plus games eventually, hopefully for the Rockets. Well, if you tie in preseason, it is 80 plus. You're playing 80 plus games, so it's going to be an adjustment period. But it's just really good to see that he kind of already knows his role, like you said, on the team. And I think that's going to go a long way in kind of speeding up his development. Is that he doesn't have to guess where he needs to be on the court or should I take this shot? Shouldn't I take this shot? Now, of course, going forward, we'll probably see more from KPJ and Jalen Green, especially when we get to the regular season. They'll probably take more control of the offense. But ultimately, that's still going to help Jabari in the long run because he's going to have a lot more open shots. Real quickly, also, I wanted to kind of talk about Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. What did you see from them last night? Because even though their shots wasn't falling, their plus minus was still really great. I can't remember if they actually finished with the highest plus minus. I know for most of the game they did have the highest plus minus, which of course is not the end all be all, but it's still a good indicator of what they're doing out on the court. So what did you see from the backcourt yesterday in that first preseason game?
Right. You stole my thunder a little bit. That was one of the first things I was
Yeah.
going to bring up. It was the plus minus. So
Yeah.
when they were on the court, they were making a huge difference. They were very impactful. And like you said, it's not the be all end all stat.
Yeah.
But we do know that like when they were on the floor, despite the fact that they weren't shooting that great, the team flourished. And that's what you want to see. And the crazy thing about like Jalen's game last night, like I'm not worried about him missing shots.
Yeah.
What I was impressed with was like he was able to get to his spots. That's what I'm looking for. Are you able to get to your spots? It just looked different. I mean, maybe I'm imagining things, but it looked different to me.
Yeah.
He looked different than he looked at the beginning of last year. Even just the confidence handling the ball, his ability to navigate screens with the ball. Like I feel like his playmaking has elevated a notch. And that's super encouraging to me because we know he can score. I mean, he scored 41 points in the last game of the regular season,
Yeah.
As a rookie. I'm not, and he went on that historical tear of, scoring 30-point games, only matched by Allen Iverson. So Jalen Green having an off shooting night is the least of my concerns, just like if Jabari Smith has an off shooting night, that's the least of my concerns. So I was very impressed with the fact that he came out and he was looking to get his teammates involved. Like I said, his handle looked a little bit tighter, and he looked more confident. And then as far as Kevin Porter Jr., I think a lot of the work that he put in during the offseason, we just saw him, doing a lot of stuff this offseason, but you just never know how that's going to translate to the game, especially him playing point guard. And I felt like he played with a very good pace yesterday. Like his pace was something that I look for when I look at a point guard. Like, are you playing with pace? Are you hitting guys when they're open? Are you making the right pass? You can make a pass, but is it the right pass? And so I saw a lot of really good things from KPJ last night. Like that right-handed, he's a left-handed player, but that right-handed cross-court pass that he made, that skip pass that he made, that was insane. That's the kind of pass that you only see guys like James Harden, LeBron James, guys of that ilk. You don't see, just an average passer make that kind of pass. And the fact that he threw it with his offhand, just kind of like if he would have thrown it with his left hand, it would have still been impressive. But he actually threw it with his right hand, and it was like you were saying, like I just really think that our backcourt is going to take another step this season. And so I was impressed. Like you were saying, like they didn't shoot very well, but like that's the least of my concerns when it comes to those two guys. I'm looking, are you making the right play? Are you getting your teammates involved? How are you, were you active defensively? And I think I saw enough of that. I think they'll have a bounce back game on Friday.
Yeah, and he mentioned that pass, and Jabari in the post game press conference was almost amazed by it. Like he didn't, he was like he like out of nowhere. He didn't expect that pass to come to him that way. So I mean, other players see it, and we've seen the development from KPJ to where it doesn't seem like he feel like he needs to go out there and force shots up. And we saw, especially in the second half, he seemed like he was even more calm. He was taking control of the game. He was getting other players involved. Like we mentioned earlier, some of the pick and rolls he ran with Bruno Fernando were really smooth. He was able to get the ball to him in the right spot. I think that's a connection we're going to see throughout the year, something that gives the Rockets another element that they really didn't have a lot last year because Christian Wood, as you mentioned earlier, didn't really seem to roll that hard to the basket or didn't set the correct pick to where he could get to the basket and be able to get the lob from KPJ or Jalen Green.
He slipped a lot of those,
Yeah.
and it was, and I know it became a point of contention for us fans because we were like, is that what Silas wants him to do, or is that just something that he's doing on his own? Because he did not set very good screens for the ball handler, and then he didn't, like you said, he didn't really roll to the basket. A lot of times, it almost felt like he was, trying to set the screen, and then give me the ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you have to set that screen, and then you have to, trust the ball handler to make the correct play. And if they score, they score. If they get it to you, they get it to you. And you saw Kevin Porter last night. He had a really good dime to Şengün as well. And then, like you said, Bruno Fernando kind of brings a different element to the game that Şengün doesn't necessarily bring. They're very different players, completely different players. But Bruno brings that vertical spacing that we really haven't had very much of since we traded Clint Capella. So, and his pace in that pick and roll, like I was impressed with it. Like I really think that Kevin Porter is gonna have a huge season.
Yeah, I honestly think he's gonna be in the running for most improved player just because I think he's gonna take that next step this year. I mean, you throw in the combination of his own improvement, being more comfortable with the offense, and it's a contract year because I mean, you can't overlook that. Players usually play better in contract years, but I just think his overall development and what we've been seeing all off season and hearing from Rafael Stone and Coach Silas about how hard he's been working. I just think that, also he has better players around him. I think that makes a difference that sometimes people kind of overlook when they're looking at these players. I mean, you can be as great as you want to be, but unless you're like one of the super duper stars like Luka or LeBron, you got to actually have really good players around you to actually be able to perform on the court and perform to your best ability. So I think with the improved spacing, Kevin Porter Jr. definitely will have a better overall year. Before we wrap it up, what are you expecting to see from the Rockets in the next game? Because Coach Silas also mentioned that don't get too in love with the rotations because they're kind of still tinkering with the rotations, trying to see what exactly lineups are going to work. As you mentioned earlier, Jason Tate wasn't even there, so we may see a whole different rotation come up in the next game. But what are you kind of expecting or want to see in the next game?
The next game, I want to see some consistency. When you have a young team, they're inconsistent by nature. They're still learning, the game, the NBA game, what to do at this level, how to be professionals. And so I want to see how they bounce back from a game where they completely dominated the opponent.
Yeah.
The Spurs are obviously in the Wemby sweepstakes. Let's be honest. Coach Popovich decided to go all in, and I think he has his eye on one of those first three picks in the draft. Definitely. So we if we're being completely honest, we did not get a full indication of where we are. So what I'm looking forward to seeing in the next game when we play a little bit better competition is if they can still do some of the things that they did the previous game. As far as defensively, as far as being connected defensively, offensively, being patient on offense, running the sets, getting guys looks, being unselfish, and that's just basketball. And when you have a young team, you got a team full of 19 and 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds. You just don't really know what to expect from game to game. If they have some adversity during a game, I want to see how they respond to that.
Yeah.
Because they pretty much just steamrolled the San Antonio Spurs, and everybody was happy. Knicks hit that half court shot, and then we did like Patrick Beverly did after they won that play-in game.
Victory laps.
Yeah, after Knicks hit that half court shot, we did the whole Pat Bev jump up on the table, routine on the way back to the locker room for halftime. So. I want to see those guys go out and see how they respond to, a team actually playing defense on them, a team, actually running an offense and we needing to make adjustments defensively. So that's pretty much what I'm looking for. It's only the second preseason game. This is really their only, this will be their second time actually playing against another team that's not themselves in practice. And so they still have a lot to learn about each other.
Yeah, exactly. And if I'm not mistaken, Toronto was the team that ended Jalen Green's 30-point streak. So
I'm still mad about that. Lachard. Like I might send like a tweet to Nick Nurse because there was no reason for that man to he specifically went in that game with a game plan to make sure Jalen Green did not score 30 on them.
Yeah, he made it a point, and I mean we've seen throughout the years that Toronto is a very disciplined defensive team, and even in the preseason. So I think even though it's a preseason game, I think that Jalen Green is going to remember that, and he's also going to remember that a lot of people were putting Scotty Barnes ahead of him as well. So even though it's a preseason game, Jalen Green is still a competitive player. I still think that he was taking it easy this game, but I actually think that Jalen Green is going to come out firing in this game. Even though it's a preseason game, just to make it a point that, hey, look, I know a lot of y'all have Scotty Barnes ahead of me, but I'm the best rookie of last year's class, and I'm going to continue to prove it throughout the year. So I think that he's going to take a small step in the next game doing that. And like I said, it's going to be good to see him go against an actual NBA defense because, that Spurs defense, I mean, it just kind of definitely seemed like they already into next year lottery ping pong ball mode because they are definitely going to be one of the worst teams in the league next year. But Toronto is a team that plays disciplined defense with Siakam and Scotty Barnes and Fred VanVleet. So we're going to see Rockets get a pretty good test in the next game. But I still expect to see, like you said, KPJ and Jalen Green have a bounce back game on the offensive end, and then we'll kind of just see how the other players, how the rookies adjust to their second preseason game coming up. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Make sure you're checking us out later in the week. We're actually going to have our first Rocket Fuel Science not podcast, but our breakdown show coming up later this week. So we're definitely looking forward to that. I appreciate Vator coming on for his first show. It was a lot of fun. We'll definitely be doing a lot more of these. So like I said, make sure you check us out later this week. We'll have a podcast also probably coming up this weekend to recap Friday's game. So make sure you are keeping tuned on that. And as always, we appreciate everybody that jumps on every single day and every single week to check out the Rocket Fuel podcast. We'll be back later on this week. So stay tuned.
All right, y'all take it easy.